The blueprint in the superintendent's office insists there are 17 steps between the first and second floors. My legs insist there are 18. The disagreement is polite until late, when the extra step arrives like a memory with weight. Entry 1, Monday, early spring, counting in public. Cedar Lane Apartments keeps its promises the way old wood does, with small pops, with varnish that remembers last summer, with windows that practice being kind to rain. I moved in during early spring and learned the stairwell quickly because the elevator was moody about afternoons. David Blackwood, the superintendent, handed me a brass key and a rule. "Count the steps," he said. "The building thinks better of you when you know its numbers." I counted on my first night, carrying a bag with tea and a too-large loaf from Willowbrook Cafe, because Tom believes in welcoming carbohydrates. 1. I said aloud in the lobby where the mailboxes sound like quiet typewriters. 2. I said, glove against the banister that had been held by generations of practical hands. The turn at 5 opened to a window over Ashford Street, and the shop's signs yawned with evening. The river smell visited from the end of the block the way a friend drops by without knocking. I climbed to 16, then 17, then my right foot lifted again. The landing met me flat, and I stumbled, not enough to embarrass the groceries, just enough to blush privately. My legs had prepared for a step that was not there. 17. I said to the paper in my pocket, the page where I keep useful numbers like bus routes and recipes that forgive error. My body replied, 18, and refused to apologize. Elena Whitmore opened her door with a mixing bowl and a smile shaped like gratitude. "Sorry to knock late," she said. The recipe forgot patience. I measured sugar by sound and held the bowl while she scraped cinnamon into the evening. When she left, she tilted her head toward the stairwell. "It added the extra one again?" she asked, as if discussing a cat that occasionally chooses a different house. "Sometimes it helps when I am carrying something for someone," she added. "The landing lets me finish arriving." I stood in the stairwell after she left and listened. The building exhaled a measured sigh, as if counting 2. Entry 2, Tuesday. Elevators, bells, and a chalk box. Willowbrook has a bell you can press for no reason except to hear a morning behave. Tom tapped it once when I told him about the extra step. "Old stairs keep a pocket for later," he said. "Think of it as a coat hook for the day." He slid a paper bag across the counter with a cinnamon bun that wore responsibility lightly, then added a tiny box of white chalk. "For your landing," he said. "Draw it every time you forgive yourself for stumbling." On my way back, I tested the elevator. The button for 2 glowed a watered saffron, the sort that flatters small promises. The car rose like warm punctuation. When the doors opened, they opened to the in-between, a narrow landing without a number where a person can decide to commit to up. I had not pressed a button for the half floor, but doors sometimes practice generosity without permission. The doors closed and opened again, correcting to 2 like a student erasing confidently. I stepped out, amused to have been greeted by the pause. I took the stairs down and counted, softer than yesterday, but no less certain. The chalk box made a quiet weight in my pocket like a suggestion. On the landing, I added a dot with the tip, a small moon of powder that looked temporary enough to comfort. A neighbor walked by, looked at the dot, and nodded as if we belonged to a club that does not advertise. 17, she said. "And the one you owe." In the lobby, David tuned the door closer with a screwdriver that whistled when metal pretended to be violin. "Do not sand the hesitation," he said when I mentioned my chalk. "Hesitation keeps ankles honest and neighbors kinder. These are not building codes. They are habits that pass for laws when they work." Entry 3, Wednesday, numbers as furniture. The stairwell carries sound like a polite rumor. Conversations from the second-floor hallway settle in the corner by step 9. The elevator bell collects itself at the bend and arrives as a single clear syllable. Someone had written a faint pencil 17 near the top riser and then varnished over it years ago. It glows under the light like history that learned to be modest. I counted down in the morning with an umbrella and the kind of alertness coffee offers without proof. 17. I said softly to the top step, and my left foot reached into nothing again for an 18 shaped like habit. I smiled, adjusted, and felt foolish. Numbers are chairs you put in the room so people can rest. Today the room had an extra chair my eyes could not see. It should have thrown me. It did not. It asked me to be a guest in my own building. At Willowbrook, Anna Whitmore set a library tote on a chair and drew a tiny 0 on a napkin. Between 1 and 2, she said, there is always a 0 that belongs to breath. Tom added a rule to the chalkboard in tidy block letters. Count out loud if no one minds. People laughed, then did it. A line of strangers walked to the door counting softly and opened it with a coordination that impressed the door. In the afternoon, I bought a pencil at the pharmacy because Marina keeps the good kind. She wrote on the receipt in tidy graphite, "Do not count to humiliate yourself. Count to arrive." It looked like a law, even though it was courtesy. I tucked the receipt behind my building key like a talisman grown from paper. Entry 4, Thursday, after midnight. The landing without a number. At night, Cedar Lane holds its breath between floors. The stair smells like varnish and old plans. The window accepts the moon without arguing about edges. I stood at the bottom of the flight with empty hands and counted in a whisper to cooperate with sleeping doors. 1, I said, and the banister warmed to my hand. 4, I said, where the corner turns and the air learns the word up. On the landing, my right foot lifted again. I found that 18 with the weight of belief rather than wood. For a thin slice of time, my body rested on a step that did not belong to the blueprint. Gravity made room. I lowered my foot to the flat landing and looked at my hand. Chalk dust glowed faintly along my palm, a constellation from dots I had placed earlier. The dust felt like permission more than proof. Below, the elevator chimed once, then twice quickly, then once again with a space. That rhythm means someone held the door for someone else. It is the stairwell's version of applause. The building turned in its sleep and did not complain. Back in my apartment, I wrote on a scrap, "Do not name the extra step in public. Naming makes some things behave like pets. I am afraid of teaching the step to expect treats." I slid the scrap under the bread box where rules can rest without becoming threats. Entry 5, Friday. Experiments in generosity. On Friday, I brought tea to David because his office looks like a toolbox learned to love chairs. He showed me the blueprint with its confident 17 and said, "Paper believes in straight lines. Floors believe in people." He does not talk like a brochure. He talks like a person who has unscrewed the wrong screw and forgiven himself before anyone noticed. I decided to experiment. I climbed with an empty backpack and counted. 17 only. No stumble. I climbed carrying Elena's mixing bowl and a bag of flour. 18 arrived, a soft pause that placed my weight gently, as if the building admired kitchens. I climbed with nothing again. 17. I climbed with a library book for Anna that asked to be returned early because it had already learned what it needed to know. 18 again. My theory stood recklessly on the landing. The extra step appears when I carry for someone besides myself. At Willowbrook, I told Tom, and he drew a tiny stair on the chalkboard with a plus sign in the landing. "Return algebra," he wrote under it. "Add weight to remove weight." The board looked pleased to be so useful. Customers tried returning things even when they had nothing to return, offering chairs and napkins and the right to speak first. The cafe grew precise and warm in equal measure. I walked home counting the number of apologies I did not rehearse. In the pharmacy, Marina nodded when I explained the algebra. "The building is old," she said. "It likes ledgers. Pay with errands. Be paid in easier landings." She slid across the counter a small eraser with a paper sleeve and the words "Thank you." "For mistakes drawn in chalk," she said. "Leave room for weather." Entry 6, Saturday. The middle moves. I have reached the middle of the story. The story prefers to keep moving. The stair assisted. I decided not to count at all, just to listen. My body knows the rhythm by now. Steps 1 through 4 are small, honest. 5 is the window and the promise of air. 6 through 9 attend politely. 10 is the one that squeaks at the edge, a chair clearing its throat. 11 and 12 complete the thought. 13 always looks faster than it is. 14 congratulates too early. 15 remembers to be a step. 16 shakes your hand. 17 stands still like a good idea. Between that stillness and the landing, my leg lifts for the extra. And that lift is where the story lives. I tested returning the moment instead of an object. I carried nothing but a decision to call my sister and listen instead of perform. The extra step appeared anyway, a soft shelf for the minute I was promising to someone else. I stood there without moving and counted slowly with no numbers, the way you count a kettle, not to hurry it, but to be nearby when readiness occurs. On the landing, I drew 3 dots and a tiny arrow pointing back down. The arrow felt like a map drawn by a neighbor. Later, coming home behind a man whose day had dented his posture, I found myself ready below him, not above. If he had stumbled at 17, I would have been the extra step. He did not stumble. My readiness still counted as something the building could spend. Entry 7, Sunday. Inversion. The step belongs to us. Inversion days arrive in ordinary coats. Sundays smelled like bread and river and clean laundry. I rode the tram 2 stops, counted breaths in a library, bought tea without sugar, and returned to Cedar Lane with a bag of screws for David and a book Anna had recommended about bridges that prefer courtesy to speed. I climbed, thinking of nothing more complicated than weather. At 17, my foot prepared to lift, then stayed. No extra step. When I reached the landing, I realized I had not needed it because the person behind me did. A faint sound, softer than a word, came from the space above the landing. The man behind me had placed his foot where mine would have, and the stair held him for a heartbeat the way a hand holds the back of a chair as you stand. He did not notice. He simply avoided a stumble that did not belong to him. We shared a step, and the building spent the moment where it belonged. I turned and nodded to him. He nodded back, unsure why gratitude had chosen his face without explanations. The elevator chimed once as if grading us generously. I wrote in my diary, "The extra step does not belong to me. It belongs to errands, and to whatever the landing decides to return to the day." Entry 8, Monday. A failure that improved the math. I tried to force the step for someone else. I confess it because the building prefers honest tenants. An elderly neighbor carried a potted fern that had aspirations of being a tree. I offered to take it, and I did not wait for her answer. I wanted to prove how well I understood my own theory. The extra step did not appear. I stumbled a little with nothing to blame but my eagerness and the fern's surprising mass. The neighbor accepted the pot back and smiled with a patience that belonged to her plants. "Let me carry my own practice," she said. I apologized and counted up slowly with empty hands feeling heavier than before. "At Willowbrook," I told Tom, and he gave me a sentence to keep near the banister. "Do not steal the chance to be strong." Anna, overhearing, added a diagram of the stair on my napkin and circled the landing. 0, she wrote. 0 is where you are allowed to choose. You chose for her. The stair withheld permission. I erased 1 chalk dot on the landing on my way up as a way to apologize to the math. Subtraction made the constellation truer. 3 dots and a tiny arrow remained, and they looked like exactly enough. The elevator chimed below. Its rhythm sounded approving. The building believes in humility the way kitchens believe in simmering. Entry 9, Tuesday late. Doors, ledgers, and the breath we share. David taped a piece of paper to the stairwell wall, ledger of returns. The columns read what went up, what came down, step borrowed, step returned. No names. People wrote quietly as if attending a small ceremony. A bowl to 5, empty hands back, 1 step borrowed, 1 returned. A story to Willowbrook, a silence back, no step needed. A screwdriver to the hinge, a door that no longer bites, 1 step returned. I added, a book to Anna, a question back, 1 step borrowed, 1 step returned. The ledger did not fix anything. It taught us to look. On my climb that night, I counted the times I had allowed someone else to finish a sentence. The extra step appeared, and I did not use it. It stood for the person behind me who breathed harder. Numbers were furniture again, and I learned that moving a chair without being asked can be helpful or rude depending on how much you notice. At home, I wrote to myself the way Marina writes on receipts. Write smaller when the page is crowded. The stair understands this better than I do. It adds a step only when the day has too many elbows. Entry 10, Friday, early summer. Soft closing, a rule I can live with. The stairwell warms by late afternoon and smells like someone learning tea. The window lets in river light that knows how to skip across varnish. I carried a bag to Elena with cinnamon and patience and carried nothing back. I took a screw kit to David and brought back a sentence he keeps on his desk. Do not polish the hesitation. I delivered a note to Tom that said only thank you for counting out loud last week. I left the ledger alone. On my last climb tonight, I counted 1, the way you greet a friend in public. At 17, I stopped and allowed the landing to be enough. My foot did not lift. I did not miss it. The elevator chimed at the lobby with the exact rhythm that means someone is holding the door for someone else, which means the building is still generous without me proving anything. On the landing, I brushed the chalk dots with my finger until they looked like a soft weather map. I blew gently, and the dust moved into the grain of the wood and became part of it. I wrote a final line in this diary. The extra step is a kind of trust. If you find it under your foot, return it before you keep it. I will sleep with the window cracked. In the morning the stairs will smell like new air. 17 will be sufficient. If I carry for someone, the landing will make room. If I carry only myself, the landing will not demand tribute. Either way, the bell will speak in clear, single notes, and I will answer by walking as if I have been counted kindly. Closing. If you live at Cedar Lane or anywhere with a stair that knows your name, count out loud once for practice and once for love. When your leg lifts for the extra step, let it be for the weight you are willing to return. When your leg stays, praise the landing for being enough. Draw a dot if you need proof, and erase it when proof weighs too much. The elevator will keep the punctuation. The building will keep your balance. Tag. Count kindly. Return the step. Afterward, 10 ways to count without numbers. 1. Count the breaths between chimes of the elevator and ask whether waiting softened anyone's day. 2. Count the times you let a door swing fully open before you entered. 3. Count the seats you returned to where they belonged even if they were not yours. 4. Count how often you placed your foot and felt the wood welcome it. 5. Count recipes that forgave you for forgetting sugar. Give Elena the credit. 6. Count how often Tom's chalkboard taught you a sentence better than coffee could. 7. Count the pencils that wrote quietly at the ledgers without signing names. 8. Count the errands that did not require applause to be finished. 9. Count the windows that hid rain until it would be soothing. 10. Count the times 17 was enough. Add 1 for the extra step you returned. If this list becomes heavy, put it down on the landing between 1 and 2. Somebody else will carry it for a moment and become taller without noticing. Addenda. Field notes on each entry. Entry 1. Field notes. I went back after writing and repeated the climb with my hands empty, the better to listen. The first step depresses slightly to the left, which means most people favor their right hand on the rail. The second step sings faintly when you drag your shoe, the exact pitch of a kettle that has decided to stop sulking. On the fourth, a scuff forms a crescent where someone turned too fast, finished late, or changed their mind. I tapped each tread with the rubber heel of my shoe and heard a scale in wood, low to high, minor and forgiving. The landing held the tone without needing to show off. A child came down counting in another language. He clutched a ribbon from a school project. His mother made the universal gesture for careful here, and he jumped the final tread as if to join a game that had been going on without him. 17 for him. For me, the memory of 18 hovered like scent. I am beginning to believe the body stores homework the mind has not finished. Entry 2. Field notes. The elevator's chime has 3 moods. A single bright note for arrival, a softer, rounder note for doors that reopen on purpose, and a double chime when the system forgives a pressed button that was meant for later. I listened until I could tell them apart without looking. When the doors opened to the unnumbered landing again, I stood inside the car while the doors thought. The pause felt like a librarian lifting a finger. The doors decided correctly. I let them be proud. I drew one chalk dot at shin height, where a hurried person would not notice, and another at eye height, where patience lives. Chalk behaves like a weather report. It fades when people obey and brightens when they do not. By evening, the lowered had smudged into approval, and the higher had learned to be a promise for tomorrow. Entry 3. Field notes. Tom's chalkboard gained a new line today. Today we thank the stairs. People laughed and then put their feet down more carefully. The board does what bells do in other buildings. It writes manners in public. Anna loaned me a thin booklet called Courtesy in Transit and said the Ashford Library had margin notes that would like to meet me. On the bus ride back, I underlined the sentence. Step where the room expects a foot, and you will meet less resistance. When I reached Cedar Lane, I stepped exactly where the grain of the wood suggested, and the stair repaid me with silence. Silence is the compliment stairs prefer. I sat on the landing for a minute and wrote the numbers from 1 to 17 on a scrap, then wrote the word later and circled it instead of drawing 18. That felt better to my hand. Later can be earned. 18 feels like cheating unless the stair offers it first. Entry 4, Field Notes. I brought a thermos to the landing and drank quietly, careful not to treat the stairwell as a cafe. The window turned the street into a moving painting of umbrellas. A neighbor paused one step below and read the dots the way you read constellations. First with imagination, then with memory. "Are those for luck?" she asked. I said, "They are for timing." She liked that and told me she sometimes leaves a dot where her day forgave her. I thought of Marina's eraser with its little sleeve and the way small tools make large rooms breathe. A draft worked through the well just then, a soft rope of cooler air winding up. It lifted the hair at my temple and tugged at the paper in my pocket until the corner folded. The fold pointed at the zero space that Anna had sketched. I unfolded the paper and refolded it neatly, a way of telling the building I understood the lesson and would practice. Entry 5, Field Notes. Experiments continued with mixed success. Carrying a book for Anna always invites the extra step. Carrying only pride invites nothing but bruised theory. Carrying tea for David invites the extra step only if the lid is secure and the cup does not slosh. The stair will not reward spills. Carrying a complaint does nothing, but carrying a question about how to improve an afternoon brings the soft shelf without fail. I wrote these in a small notebook titled Stairs, Methods. The title makes me laugh and also stand straighter. At Willowbrook, Tom drew a tidy table with 2 columns labeled up and down. Under up he wrote kindness, tools, bread, patience. Under down he wrote thanks, empty bowl, quiet breath. Someone added a 3rd column in pencil, returned. Under it, a child wrote, my turn to carry. The chalk smeared a little where a sleeve had agreed. Entry 6, Field Notes. I watched 5 people take the stairs while I sat on the landing pretending to tie my shoe. The first, a courier with a box on one shoulder, counted with his mouth closed, which is still counting. He did not stumble. The second, a woman reading a text message with the attention of a jeweler, started to trip at 13 and recovered with a little laugh that asked nobody for permission to keep being brave. The third, an elderly man with a cane, treated every rise as a friend with a name. He greeted the landing like church. The fourth, a teenager who pretended he had somewhere better to be, took the steps 2 at a time and then slowed before the top, as if reminded by a sentence he had once admired. The fifth was me. I climbed without counting and found I could locate each tread by listening to my ankle's memory. In the afternoon, I walked the river and practiced counting with other measures. The number of lampposts that hummed, the benches that forgave graffiti, the gulls that landed without apologizing for their feet. 17 was everywhere when I looked, but it formed different shapes. Rows of windows, balusters on a railing, pavers around a drain. The extra 1 appeared as a reflection, not as a thing to stand on. Entry 7, Field Notes. After the inversion, I noticed a kindness. When I used the landing as a shelf for a moment that belonged to someone else, the rest of the day became easier in corners. People like to be carried for a minute without owing you explanations. The extra step seemed to tune my patience, the way a minute of silence before a performance tunes a room. I pressed my palm to the wall and felt a faint, slow warmth moving upward as if heat were taking the stairs with me. I wrote on the ledger David posted. Today I stood 1 second longer at the mailbox and a neighbor's envelope reached the slot without hurry. 1 step returned. Writing it made my shoulders drop. The elevator chimed once like agreement that had learned to speak gently. Entry 8, Field Notes. The day after the Fern incident, I practiced letting people carry what belonged to them. It hurt a little in the muscles that enjoy being useful. Marina called that ache the volunteer's knot and told me to stretch it by asking, would you like help? Instead of, let me. The stair approved. The extra step appeared for a woman 2 steps above me who deserved it more, and I watched without claiming credit for gravity's civility. That evening I erased another chalk dot, then redrew it smaller and closer to the wall, a sign for those who need it more than for those who like to be clever. Minimal signage, maximal courtesy. The constellation still pointed toward the window, toward outside, toward other people. Entry 9, Field Notes. The ledger gained a line in someone else's precise hand. 1 apology unspoken, because the truth arrived instead. 1 step returned. Another line said, a laugh carried upstairs and shared at Willowbrook. 1 step borrowed, then forgiven. The wall was becoming a study in arithmetic that improved tempers. David added a final instruction at the bottom. If you take a photo, make it of the light. I obeyed. I took a photo of the light slanting through the window over step 5, the dust motes practicing choreography in a discipline of drift. The picture looked grainy and polite, like an old film that remembers being relevant. 17 little bars of light touched the risers. Above them, a faint 18th shadow smeared along the edge of the landing like a secret that did not need a name. Entry 10, Field Notes. Soft closings are a Cedar Lane specialty. The front door knows how to land gently against its frame. The elevator knows how to pause for a stroller without turning patience into performance. The stair knows how to stop where it should unless invited by need. I walked the flight after dinner with nothing but gratitude in my pockets, which sounds like a speech until you do it for real and learn it is simply posture. At the landing, I placed my foot flat and kept it there for the length of one elevator chime. I thought of Tom's chalkboard, of Anna's pencil, of Marina's eraser, of David's screwdriver singing its small metal song. I thought of Elena's buns and the way cinnamon smells like a promise you are already keeping. I breathed and felt taller in a way that had nothing to do with inches. Then I went inside and wrote this. If you cannot hear the building say thank you, try counting slower. Coda, small vignettes for future tenants. A woman in a yellow raincoat paused at step 11 and looked as if she had lost a word. I said, "It will be where you left your keys." She laughed, found a pen in her pocket, and wrote the word on her palm. 17 greeted her without ceremony. The extra step, hearing itself unneeded, rested. A delivery driver balanced 2 boxes and a story about his daughter learning to ride a bike. He spoke with his hands until the stairs required them. I walked behind and counted softly in my chest like a metronome for safety. At the landing, he said, "Thank you for pacing me," as if I had invented air. A man with a new cane tested each tread with a patience that could teach the clock to behave. On the landing, I stood aside far enough to make room and near enough to be a plan. 17, he said at the top, proud and out of breath. 18 when I bring soup to my sister. I told him the building would approve. If you read this and think the stair is a parlor trick, you are welcome to believe that too. Tricks are only rituals without context. Give the landing context, errands, returns, pauses you are willing to spend, and you will find the arithmetic kinder. If you insist on blueprints, talk to David. He will show you the lines and then lend you a screwdriver that sings. Appendix, night register of sounds. I made a chart of the stairwell's night noises because counting sounds like counting steps when you do it softly. The refrigerator 2 doors down hums in the key of patient. It settles at the edge of step 10. The radiator on the landing taps 5 times, rests, then taps twice as if apologizing for the first opinion. The elevator cables sigh in long vowels that wash up against the risers like tide. Occasionally a late shoe slides and recovers. The rubber grants itself mercy without paperwork. There is a bird that sleeps in the gutter outside the window and scolds the rain when it starts. The scold contains 17 notes if you are generous, fewer if you insist on being correct. The extra note arrives when a car door closes too loudly on Ashford Street. I listened until I could predict it, and then listened longer until predicting no longer mattered. That is how the stair teaches time. Guide. How to return the step for polite souls. 1. Do not chase the extra step. Let it find you while you are carrying something for someone else. 2. If you must test it, carry a question rather than a certainty. 3. Place your foot as if the floor were tired. Floors appreciate empathy. 4. When the extra step appears, use it without drama and leave it without gloating. 5. At the landing, breathe once longer than you think is efficient. 6. If you drew a chalk dot, erase it when its job is done. 7. If you did not draw the dot, do not erase it. That belongs to the person who needs the ceremony. 8. Tell no one unless telling will make tomorrow kinder. If you feel cheated when the step does not appear, check your pockets for pride. It is heavy enough to hide a number. Postscript. When the stairs are fewer than 17. Twice now I have counted only 16 because the step that wears the number 13 absorbed 2 without telling anyone. The first time happened after Marina taped a sign at the pharmacy that read, "Please ring twice then wait." People obeyed, and the stair must have noticed that patience had been paid elsewhere. It shortened the climb in quiet gratitude. The second time happened when Tom closed 5 minutes early to walk a customer to the tram in rain. The The stair spent a step on him and billed my flight accordingly, and I paid with a smile I did not bill to anyone. Balance matters more than totals. I wrote on the ledger, 16 today, because someone down the block kept a promise. The line looked good there. It made the wall intelligent. Letter from the landing, found and signed. If you stand where the air bends and wonder if wood will materialize, know that I am not a trick. I am practice made visible. I arrive when you are already taller than your day and leave when standing flat will do. I do not accept names. I accept errands and pauses. When you place a dot in chalk, you are not summoning me. You are reminding yourself that numbers volunteer. If you are tired, lean on the rail and let me perform my absence. Absence is a kind of help when it means the floor is enough. I do not know who wrote this. The pencil had an eraser mark where a word had tried to be miracle and then chose practice instead. Addendum: the 17 ways of saying thank you without words. 1. Step aside at the turn so a stroller can pivot without geometry. 2. Lift your bag to avoid scuffing the riser that already knows sorrow. 3. Let the elevator door close and trust the next chime to include you. 4. Hold the letterbox for a neighbor whose hands are arguing with envelopes. 5. Carry your keys quietly. 6. Place your foot with intention on the place that has already welcomed feet. 7. Touch the banister as if greeting an elder. 8. Tuck in a chair left wild in the lobby. 9. Do not correct someone's count unless safety insists. 10. Bring tea to a tired repair. 11. Return a borrowed name with care. 12. Smile at the chalk even if you disagree with its grammar. 13. Add a dot only when you mean it. 14. Erase a dot only when its meaning has been used up. 15. Let a sentence finish itself before you breathe in to begin yours. 16. Accept help without arguing your resume. 17. Count kindly on days the world chooses to be arithmetic. These are not commandments. They are furniture. Final note to self. If I ever move, I will count the new stairs without nostalgia. I will listen for the extra number and refuse to own it. I will carry for others and let them carry for me. I will teach any ledger that appears on my wall to take weather instead of names. I will show up at Willowbrook or some cafe with a bell and insist that bells are for punctuation as well as announcements. I will write to Anna and David and Tom and Marina and Elena even if they are only new names for old manners. If there is no stair at all, if I live on a floor that is always flat, I will count pauses and I will be fine. Postscript: 17 becoming 18. Tonight, after writing too long and drinking water that tasted faintly of copper honesty, I took the stairs once more. I counted in the language my grandmother used for baking, soft numbers that prefer to live in a bowl. On 16, the elevator chimed. On 17, the landing widened, or I widened. My leg lifted, and for a thin, bright moment, I felt the exact size of the promise we make when we say, I will bring this to you. No weight, no wobble, just a height offered and returned. I set my foot down and understood why David keeps the screwdriver that sings. We are tuning, not fixing. The stair tuned me. I can live with that.